Welcome back, sci-fi fans, to the Science Fictionary Podcast. I'm Andrew, and as always, I'm here with Marisha.
Hello.
Not as always. That would
Usually.
be like usually.
As
like,
usually.
Some of those videos I've done lately, she's not here or she's invisible. I'm not going to reveal that information.
It's one of life's great questions.
It is. It is. And you're just going to have to forgive me if there's some random technical issues tonight. I don't really know what's going on, but things.
This podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.
See, things are happening.
Mm. One of life's great mysteries.
One of life's great mysteries. Is anybody in the chat? Probably not, because sorry guys, I didn't let anybody know we were doing this. So hopefully
we didn't know we were doing this.
We didn't know we were doing it either. And that's just kind of going to be the way it's going to be here. My plan is 3 streams a week minimum. And they're probably not going to be scheduled ahead of time. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell and get alerted when I go live. Also, I believe this thing is automatically sending out notifications on Twitter when I go live. This is a new app. We switched from StreamYard to Melon, so we're going to see how that goes. A little less user friendly, but I think better features.
A little more customizable.
But a little more customizable. I think it's worth the extra features.
If you're you and like to customize. Me does not like to customize. Me likes easy.
It did take me like twice as long as usual to get the show started tonight because they updated the menu here and I couldn't find it all. But we're going to talk about the new She-Hulk series on Disney Plus.
It's exciting stuff.
It's on Disney Plus, not us.
No, alas. If we were on Disney Plus, we would actually be making money instead of spending money.
It's true. It's true. That's another thing. Go leave if you've got a favorite podcast out there, they're doing this for themselves. They're doing it for fun. They're doing it to create content for you. They're not making money. Most of them are just like us. They're spending money to do this. Go give them a review and a subscribe and just let them know that you appreciate what they're doing because sometimes you just need a little encouragement to keep moving forward with this.
It's like doing laundry. It's productive. Although I don't guess podcasting needs to be done, but it should be done.
Does laundry need to be done?
Yes.
Okay.
After it came out of my mouth, I realized it's not really a very good analogy, but it made sense in my head.
Yeah.
This podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.
You were warned, bro. You were warned. 5 uses. And then I will get it out of my system. But that's 2.
Mm-hmm. All right, She-Hulk.
All right, so what'd you think?
It was fine. I mean,
no, you're not wrong. That was kind of the general consensus. I was on live. If you want to hear more than what I say here, I've already talked about it once. I was on with the Scarif podcast on their YouTube show last night with Ro and Chantel, and we talked at length about this. And I think that was kind of the general consensus was it was okay.
I think people who really love the She-Hulk comics really seem to be loving the show.
Yeah, and like I said last night, there's nothing about it that I just hate. There was nothing that hooked me either. I watched it twice, and I found myself wandering off during the second viewing. Yeah. It doesn't have the charm of Ms. Marvel. Mm-hmm. I think it's got its own kind of charm. Don't get me wrong, but it's. I think that the charm of Ms. Marvel, especially the charm around the family, is what really grabbed you. There's really no other characters in this yet. You've basically got Jen Walters and Bruce. Mm-hmm. and that's it.
Yeah, we only met anybody else very briefly.
So I do enjoy. I think there's some fun stuff in there. I think we kind of get some pictures of what life was like for Bruce during the blip.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's still really missing his good friend Tony.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's things that to remind him of Tony all over the place.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, including him stating, Tony always joked and talking about the place that he had given him to live.
Right.
Said always joked that it was a loner, and one day he was just going to swoop in and take it back. And so it's like he's just still kind of waiting for. So I think that adds a lot to. So I know that the Smart Hulk. I know you're not a fan of the Smart Hulk at all, and I do think our Rage Monster Hulk is coming back. Like I think something's going to happen, and they're going to have to let the beast back out of the cage. But I'm also curious if we're going to get sort of a transformation of his abilities to control it.
Yeah.
Based on her, because hers is a little, because I think the interesting thing, I know there's some complaints about, well, why is hers different than his? Why is hers?
I mean, she's got like a minuscule exposure compared to his.
Absolutely. She's not nearly as strong as he is. I know there were complaints. Well, why is she like the yoga scene? Why can she has better control over all this stuff than he does? Well, she changed a lot less.
Right.
For starters. And, when you look at the two characters and go, oh, what? She's more agile? Like, you can't buy that? Like.
Right. Because on the whole, like, if we're comparing we're not comparing Marisha and Andrew doing yoga. Hey, Nicole, how's it going? But compare like most men and their wives doing yoga. The husbands aren't usually going to come out on the top of that particular scenario. I said not us, I said most. Yes, Andrew's much more athletic than Marisha. It's not a secret.
So yeah, I don't have any problems with that. I do think it's interesting. It's a mutation, right? So yeah, it makes sense that it's different.
Yeah.
And I said this last night. I'm glad that she's not, because She-Hulk is a derivative character.
Right.
Right. She's derivative of the Hulk. She still is, but she's not like 100% derivative. It's not just the same character and the same problems to deal with. Hers is different, and so her trauma is going to be different. The way she reacts to it's going to be different.
She's a different person.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's kind of one of the things. Like, we kind of get Bruce Banner. He's always a bit of a loner. He's always, really the only person he seems to be super invested in is his girlfriend. Right back in the first Hulk movie. And,
for the love of God, bring that character back.
Right. She was really great. I really do miss Betty
Ross.
Ross. Yes, I couldn't remember the last name. I was going to say Betty Barnes.
Was Thunderbolt Ross's daughter. So.
I know, but I still couldn't remember the name. So yeah, I would love to see Liv Tyler in Marvel again. She was. Really
I hadn't seen Liv Tyler in anything in a while.
That's true. She's great.
Yeah.
She's been on like some kind of cop show.
Okay. But yeah, I would like to see her back. I don't know why they haven't brought her back, and I know the reason we've never gotten another Hulk movie. Universal still owns distribution rights to the character, and Disney doesn't really want to share that money. Now, at the same time, they're sharing an awful lot of money with Sony right now.
True.
Like,
the Hulk is not Spider-Man though.
Well, nothing is Spider-Man, but Hulk is certainly up there. As far as popular superhero characters, it's one of the few A-listers that Marvel has done anything with, to be honest. So yeah, it's but the real reason that they don't want to share with Universal is because of the constant competition with the two parks right down the street from each other. Yeah, the fact that they can't even do Marvel stuff in the park at Disney World.
Yeah.
Because of Universal right down the street. And Universal actually tried to block them from using the heroes in the campuses in California and Europe. And Disney said, no, our deal is for Florida. So yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's just they're like, Disney doesn't have many competitors anymore.
No, but Universal is definitely competes. Universal doesn't compete well at all with them on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
But Universal is, I would say Universal is the chief competitor at this point. I mean, Six Flags is not what it was in the 80s and 90s. In the 80s and 90s, it was all about Six Flags. Not that the others weren't big and awesome, but Six Flags was more accessible.
Well, but especially after Universal went and built that Harry Potter park.
I
mean, whenever Harry Potter...
Universal decided to not just be a simple theme park, but to start, in some ways, mirroring some of the things that Disney had done successfully.
And they really... I mean, there was a lot of talk about Galaxy's Edge being like the Universal Park, but for Star Wars. You know, and that they even kind of upped the ante, which is, you know, if you can one up Disney, then that's no mean feat.
Yeah, and I mean, I think as far as like, I've never been to Universal. I've only been to Disney. I've only been to Disney once as an adult. But based on people I know that go to both, it seems that if you want to go to a park and see a lot of things, you go to Disney. If you really want to go ride rides, that Universal's kind of the place. At least that's the kind of the feeling I get from it.
And just, you know, the immersive aspect they managed to pull off with the Harry Potter stuff, I think has been
really successful. They were more successful, I would say, at this point than Disney has been with with theirs. Not that I haven't seen Disney, so I can't really comment on it, except that it seems like in their effort to be, it still seems to me that if they wanted to appeal to the broadest group of fans, you wouldn't have limited yourself to the sequel era. I think that it would have just been better to have just said, hey, it's Star Wars, like anybody can show up.
Right.
Like, not, you don't have to leave the sequels out, but like, you know, I want to see classic heroes show up, and I want to see, you know, classic stormtroopers and that kind of stuff. But anyway, we're kind of straying from the topic, which is kind of the norm around here. So what did you think? What did you think about the pacing?
It was fine. No.
This had the opposite problem for me of most series. I felt like we were rushing from thing to thing. Now, I think that we had some real good stuff on the at the beach house, where but it was kind of the other things, how we got there, and then everything after felt super rushed to me.
Yeah, and well, it was a little bit that the timeline, like the non-continuous storytelling, is always a bit of a challenge, and it was kind of like boop boop boop, you know, a little bit of that going on. It isn't usually my favorite way to tell stories. I prefer to see, you know, like, oh, all right, because then you're like, oh, wait a second, that hasn't happened yet. There was something that happened in the show, and I was like, oh, well, you know, and I was like, okay, well, you know, this is relevant. And it's like, oh wait, this is relevant to this thing that hasn't happened yet, you know. So it was fine, but there were definitely places where it felt a little bit rushed. I would have thought we would have spent a little more time kind of in our getting centered world there on our little island, or wherever it is in Mexico, I guess, somewhere. But it was okay. I think they're really that's not the story they're looking to tell. They're looking to tell the dynamics of a lawyer who hulks out.
Yeah, and see, I don't even know how much more we will see of Bruce after this episode. I would think probably not a lot. But I do think that they kind of filled in some interesting stuff on what might be up next for the Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Megan, thanks for joining us in this unscheduled podcast.
Yes. So nobody else is here because we didn't tell anyone we were doing this. We're just sort of, shut up.
I agree. I think the courtroom scene was the most rushed, to the point where I was actually really unhappy that we didn't get a little bit more of a fight. Mm-hmm. I don't know much about the villain. They kind of hyped her up to be a primary villain for this show. I don't know if that's true or not. But I don't see how that works. I mean, she went down so easy in that scene. It was sort of anticlimactic. And
now that I feel could be the line for the episode. It wasn't bad, but it was a little anticlimactic. It's like there was not just a whole lot of, there was a lot of information, but not too much in the way of a story for the episode. I didn't feel like. I mean, it's only episode 1, so there's plenty of time to really get into that, but it was a little haphazard just in the way that they kind of dropped information on you. Yeah.
So let's talk real quick about we didn't talk about this last night really at all. So
you too could get a notification if you were subscribed.
It's true.
All viewers, all 3 of you.
Hey, there's 4 people watching. I think one of them.
Yeah, I watch on my phone so I can comment. Because you hog the keyboard.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about what has kind of been, of course, the predictable controversies around this show. It has a little bit of I hate to call it a feminist flair, because feminism can mean several things.
Yeah.
I would say this leans more into, like, so far, feminism as we would have seen it in its earlier iterations. It's not the.
I mean, yeah, we don't.
It's not screaming political, Marxist nonsense.
It's not the, men have to be the worst because women have to be the best kind of narrative that we kind of see sometimes. It doesn't, like, I'm sure there are people who are going to hate it because, honestly, there are people who are going to be like, they're calling us misogynist jerks. And so now I'm going to get on the screen for the next hour in a very misogynist and jerky way. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of those people on Twitter, on YouTube rather. I'm sure they're on Twitter too, but it's not, the main character is a woman, and whether you like it or not, there are dynamics to being a woman that if you're a man, you may not have considered, right? Whenever he says, we're talking about fear. And she's like, okay, so basically just, like, you don't understand, like, I walk down the street and I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, now that's not necessarily my experience because I live in a small town where I'm pretty safe, but there have definitely been times that I'm walking down the streets of New Orleans by myself and I think I'm vulnerable here.
I get that same feeling in New Orleans, to be frank.
Yeah, New Orleans,
and I don't feel vulnerable very many places, but
it's true.
Walking in the dark in New Orleans is
it's a kind of a vulnerable place. But like I said, there are there are statements that she makes that a lot of people don't necessarily care for, and that was really the main one where she was. But
the thing is, if you want this world to feel realistic, right? We want this cinematic universe to feel real. Then you have to have people with different points of view and different ways of looking at the world, and people that experience the world around them in different ways.
Yeah.
And this makes sense, like, to have that. And of course, let's be honest, that's what She-Hulk always was.
Mm-hmm.
Was kind of a book built to address these things. I mean, people forget that some of these characters, like favorite characters right now, like Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman was
Right.
very much a book written to be a feminist point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like, and I think they do a good job of not taking this, not making it political, but just addressing the fact with, hey, like when I'm out certain places, I'm afraid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that is it. This is the why I have kind of started like living by the mantra of don't discount someone's life experiences because yours don't match.
Well, and honestly, I spent a lot of my life in, like, of course, this because you're married to me, but in sort of my little safe bubble of homeschooled church people where men treated me with respect consistently, like was never just walked into a room and was catcalled or felt like I was being objectified or, and I would see women talk about this and I was like, that's not how the world really is. Well, turns out that is how the world really is outside of my bubble of nice people. And so that was really kind of enlightening for me to realize, just even as a woman, even if that hasn't been how I've always felt about life, I'm very lucky that way. I'm very fortunate that way, that I haven't been harassed by strangers in the street, and I haven't, walked into a party and been afraid that somebody's going to put something in my drink. That doesn't mean that the world's not that way. It just means that I have been so fortunate as to not have to deal with those things on a regular basis in my life.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Like, people are crappy.
People are crappy. Yes.
And when someone says, hey, someone was a really crappy person towards me, like, the odds are
true.
That it's probably true.
It's probably true. Yeah.
Yep. So specifically the scene where the three guys come out of the bar behind her.
Yes.
Was what I was going to ask you about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was interesting. Because that's another one of those things that I haven't, now that I work and I go to, when I'm out of town and I go out with people, I can, I've got a little more like, okay, you walk by that person, and that's just very believable, you're here. And as soon as I saw the way they were dressing her, and I was like, she's going to walk out there and that's not going to go well. Wearing that big furry jacket, and she's got the glam, and she's standing out. She's just sort of loitering outside the bar. I mean, it's got.
Well, it certainly gave off a very specific message.
It gave off a vibe. And like as soon as I saw her kind of leaning against that post, I was like, I think I know where this storyline is getting ready to go. And I mean, but here's the thing, like, I don't understand why that's something that people would. I'm assuming that that's kind of something that people are taking issue with. But doesn't everybody in the world wish that they could just clobber a group of men who's treating a woman that way? Like, isn't that just sort of like, as a human, don't you just go, yes, someone please punch their lights out? That's how I feel. And that's, again, my little bubble. Like, any man ever talked to me that way, walking out of a room, it would not have gone well.
Yeah.
So, yes, more power to her. They deserve to get their little lights punched out.
Unfortunately, they didn't get their lights punched out, but
what? Okay, wait. So wait.
She's about to attack them, and Bruce stops her. Bruce tackles her. Like, we just see a flash across the screen that's Bruce tackling her, and then she wakes up in the bed.
Oh, that's right. Okay,
yeah.
You're right. All right. So clearly I only saw this episode once. I remembered the build up to it, but I didn't remember
The thing is I'm relatively certain that that's the scene from the trailer where she does clobber them.
Okay, see? I think so, because I'm feeling like I
sort of feel like they cut that scene, and I don't know why.
Interesting.
Unless that's a totally different scene.
Yeah. And so now that's the point where he discovers that she actually is retaining control, right? Because he assumes that she's just hulked out and is just going to kill him, basically.
No, that's the scene where he realizes that she's still in control is when he has her in the room with all the saw blades. And she comes out and he starts trying to calm her down like a horse. He even like makes like a horse noise.
Yeah. And
like she's some kind of beast. Because I mean that's his experience with the other guy, which is just 100% his rage.
Yeah.
Is that she's a rage monster right now. So he's gonna calm her, but he talks to her like you're calming down a wild horse. And she's like, why are you doing that? And he's like, wait a minute. Like
yeah.
So yeah, but that's why I'm curious, like if learning more about her and her powers is going to give him the ability to not have to be this combined thing, but to have control over the Hulk and to be able to be whichever one he needs to be.
Yeah.
That's a logical progression here. So I kind of hope that's where they go. I think having Bruce and the Hulk is more fun than Smart Hulk.
Not to mention cheaper.
Yeah. So Smart Hulk is actually interesting in some ways to me though, because he's got all the abilities, but it's Bruce. And so it's the mild-mannered like
rawr. He goes through smash it. All right, I guess I'll go smash some things, right?
Yeah. So what did you think about their when they finally get irritated with each other and get in a fight on the beach?
Oh, I've got cousins. That's 100%. Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
100% tracks.
I mean, I thought they did a good job with that because my fear, and a lot of people are saying they've done, is made her better than, more powerful than the Hulk. She's just different. And Bruce says as much. It's like, she's like, oh, so I'm better? He says, it's more like different.
Right.
Because she starts trying to show off. And of course he can't help it. He picks a rock up and like launches it into the atmosphere.
Right.
So, I think that they made a point. And then when they do get in a fight, like he doesn't want to hurt his cousin.
Right.
And
he's not actually looking to.
So she's trying to hurt him.
Right.
And he's just like trying to put a stop to it. And
yeah.
So I think they did a good job with that, with having a way that they could kind of have a fight, because realistically at this point, like Hulk is immensely more powerful.
He's pulling his punches.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I have no problem with the fact, and people talking about, well, she got a grasp on it so much quicker than he did, and it's like, did she though? Because like he basically just hulks out and turns into this rage monster and goes on a spree of destroying everything in his path. Like it wasn't like there's not a learning curve. He's teaching her how to be a Hulk and have self-control. Right. Is what he's trying to teach her. There's not a learning curve to being a Hulk.
Right.
Like
there's a learning curve to reining it in.
Yeah. There's no learning curve to just being the rage monster.
Right.
It's harnessing the rage monster. Which is a really kind of cool dynamic. And I think what gets me I think what I like about Smart Hulk, and I think I would like about him having the ability to just transition between the two at any given time, is this idea of being meek, of being humble. It's a trait the Hulk himself can't have,
right? Because
of what he is. But the two together, he's like, because meekness, for some reason in English we translate that directly as weakness, and that's not the right translation. It's humbleness. It's power restrained.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Smart Hulk is.
Mm-hmm.
Is power
under control.
Under control.
Yeah, almost limitless power.
Yeah.
I mean, really, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's a really interesting, just kind of following the trajectory. And I think for just narratively, it would have been tedious to tell that whole story, that whole sort of, the rage monster and the like gradually 15 years worth of learning to rein it in. Like we already have seen that story. And so I think that they, just having a like, okay, she was exposed to his blood, so she's got a much more contained, she's got a much better hold on it just because it's much less huge. Her contamination is minuscule compared to his.
Right.
And so, I mean, if you think it works, she's just had a radiation poisoning, right? So it's gamma radiation. So somebody who's got a lethal dose of radiation versus somebody who's always got a cell phone stuck to their face, like obviously you have different degrees of radiation, right, going on in your body.
Right.
So yeah, it works, I think.
So overall, I like the dynamic. I want to see the dynamic. I want to see her interact with other characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's one of the things that was missing here is it's just really her and Bruce. Everybody else is kind of like inconsequential to this story.
For now, yeah.
You've got the other lawyer that's just kind of a jerk. But that's most lawyers that I know. They just act like that. They all think they're better than everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's part of like why they're successful in the courtroom.
Right.
Because it's the same reason fighter pilots are successful at what they do.
Surgeons,
firefighters.
God complex.
Yeah. It's this idea that, I'm the best in the room, and you kind of carry that air about you all the time. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that character's terrible. Or it's like, they just did that to make him look bad compared to her. And it's like, I have no problem whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever met a lawyer? You believe it.
Because we've seen female lawyers act the same way in Daredevil.
Yeah.
So like, who cares? Like, like quit trying to make this something that at least at this point it isn't.
Yeah.
At this point, I think it's a decent setup to what I hope is a really good show. I'm really excited about all the characters that are going to be showing up. We know Daredevil's going to be in there. Wong's going to be in there. Blonsky's going to be in there.
Yes.
The
Abomination.
Mm-hmm. So.
Man, I haven't seen that actor in anything in a real minute.
I'm sure he's been in stuff, just nothing I watch.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm excited to see that show up again because
this podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.
You got to get it under control of. You got to get your shoot, what's the word? Technical difficulties. That's the word. You got to get your technical difficulties under control.
I told Ro that I was going to use that clip 5 more times.
All right.
5 more. That's 3, Ro.
This is not good for conversation flow, love. All right, where were we?
So, I mean, at this point, like, I think we've kind of talked about everything. Is there anything else that you really wanted to touch on?
I don't think so. I mean, At this point, I feel like it's just sort of an introduction, which is really kind of what your first episode typically is.
Yeah.
I do
this
feel
felt a little more like a TV, like a real, like made for cable TV pilot. Like, you know, because like we don't really use the term pilot episode when we're talking about these streaming shows. They're not pilots. Pilot shows are a single episode made to sell a product to a studio.
Right.
And so that's why things a lot of times, like the Star Trek pilot is the perfect example. The Star Trek pilot is nothing like episode 2, the real first episode of Star Trek.
Right, yeah.
Because they did the pilot, the studio didn't really want it. A couple of people, including Lucille Ball, basically said, no, you're going to do this. And so they buy Star Trek, they run the show, but they completely retooled the lead.
Yes.
And
Shatner was a way better lead than Pike.
Oh, for sure. So these aren't really true pilots. They're not a single episode made to sell it. It's an episode that's it's just the first episode. And
I think that she's right. I think if we had gotten the first 2 episodes, I think it would have been a little better.
I think I would be. I'm at least. I'm hoping. I'm thinking. You know, I like where it's going. It does feel a little bit like a letdown coming off Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel was so good. That I think that was a big hill to climb for this show. I would have kind of hated to have been in charge of the show that was coming after, right? Yeah. But you know, it is what it is. It's kind of like having to be the show that follows The Mandalorian, and then you get Book of Boba Fett, and then so all of your less than polished things are very glaring.
Right. Yeah.
So it is what it is. It's. Did you turn the printer on?
No, I'm trying to. I keep hitting with my foot. I'm moving it. Oh, there's Mom wanting to know when we're going to bring the kids to go to dinner.
That sounds good. I'm hungry.
That sounds good. I'm hungry too. Yes. It is a perfect. We're having turkey.
That sounds dangerous. I will reserve my other 2 uses of the of that for another episode, so I don't get any more angry looks.
Yeah.
Okay. As soon as the camera quits shaking. Okay. So, was there anything else you wanted to touch on before you wrap? Because I think we've kind of covered everything. Although I talked a lot more about this so far than you have. So, if there's anything else that you wanted to cover,
I think that
yeah, absolutely. It's like having to follow Jerry Lee Lewis when he burned the piano.
Yeah.
Like if you don't know that reference, it's worth looking up. I don't even remember who it was, and they were mad about following Jerry Lee Lewis rather than going first. They thought they should have been the headliner and gotten in and gotten out. And Jerry Lee Lewis lit the piano on fire and played it, and then walked off. Of course, in real life, there's no telling how that exactly went. In the movie about Jerry Lee Lewis, he walks past the other musician and says, "Follow that," and leaves. So yeah, it's sort of like that. Like Miss Marvel was that good, and it was going to be hard to follow.
Yeah, I think so. And honestly, on the whole, these shows have just been so good.
They have, and I've really liked them all. Like they're not all my favorite show or anything. I think there are a couple that are vastly superior to the others, but I've enjoyed them all. Yeah. And I fully expect to enjoy this one. You're right, Nicole. It was Chuck Berry.
See, I always think about Back to the Future. I think about Chuck
Berry.
Oh,
speaking of, I'm going to go.
Marvin.
So your mom has to keep the kids Wednesday afternoon, so I can go see Back to the Future.
I want to hear about it. I'm working.
Marisha's going to be working.
My favorite.
Hey, maybe Morgan Freeman will be on set.
He will. Yeah, unless the dark side offers great medical care. Hey, if the dark side offers great medical care, I might just be there. So here's kind of just sort of like not Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, kind of in the context of other Marvel movies. Jeez, my words have quit working. I think we're gonna have to be done here pretty quickly. It's different. It's really different, and honestly, I think that's a good thing. I am excited to see them really making an effort to make different kinds of shows within the Marvel kind of umbrella.
Yeah.
She-Hulk is very different from any of the other Marvel shows. And honestly, with stories that different, they're not going to all be everybody's favorite.
True.
And I think this will be some people's
It's just
jam.
like Ms. Marvel. I understand why some people didn't like Ms. Marvel.
Yeah. And I think that this will not be some people's jam, and some people are just going to be their favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think that that's a good thing, because it means that they're not kind of locking themselves into a box where it's like, this is how franchises become really stale. They say, this thing worked, make it again. It worked again, make it again. And so they keep making the same thing over and over again because it worked.
Right.
And
well, the good thing is Marvel has never really been guilty of that. There have been a few that have been sort of derivative, but by and large, we've, even though they definitely kind of have a formula, it's not like we've stayed in one genre.
Right. Yeah.
It's like one genre is in, they're all comic book movies, but like Marvel has covered a lot of different genres.
Yeah.
With their movies and TV shows at this point.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see that, even if it isn't going to be my favorite, I think it's good for the future of the franchise that they are experimenting with different kinds of storytelling in the TV shows and not just in the movies. I mean, because TV is a different medium.
Yeah.
And
for
so they've gone for really different feels, and pretty much all these shows they've gone in for. And I think that's good. I think that it bodes well for Marvel on Disney Plus.
Yeah. And as we've seen, like, I know there are some people that are kind of down on the way that Marvel, phase 4 of Marvel, that they're disappointed in the performance. Some of the movies haven't made very much money. I don't know if any have actually lost money. I would assume that the Eternals probably lost a little money.
Yeah, that one was really, really expensive.
It also got banned from quite a few countries.
Okay, no, honestly, they got banned from a few countries because
of their marketing.
Yes. But they also, I'm trying to, weren't they banned in Saudi Arabia?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were banned in a couple of countries.
They were banned in like 30 countries.
Yeah. And honestly, in some ways, I'd rather see the movies make a little bit less, because they are just like, you know what? It is what it is. We're not going to retool our movie so that your market will accept it. I don't feel like that has always been. I don't feel like that has always been good for media.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I would kind of like to see them continue that trend of, especially this thing where we have to retool everything so that it will get, an acceptable release in China. Right. Shang-Chi I don't think didn't release in China either.
No. And look,
which is really a disappointment, since those, since the Eternals had a Chinese director.
Yeah.
And Shang-Chi, was...
Hey, the thing is like, China is a very, very different place than here. I'm completely over companies in this country whether it be sports entertainment or film industry or TV industry, bending over for a bully dictator in China.
And that's the thing. Like, if the market, if you want to retool your story so that it is more palatable to the people in China or in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else in the world, that's one thing. But because the dictator says you can't play that and okay, well, yeah, it's exactly what Hollywood was doing to the Nazis. In the 30s, they did so much stuff to try and keep the Nazis happy. And
Absolutely.
We judge them for that now because the Nazi regime was evil. And so is the dictatorship in China. Like the communist Chinese, I mean, they are killing people. They're the Nazis. They're exactly the same as the Nazis were. They're committing genocide based on sexual orientation, religion, and ethnic, ethnic group.
100%.
And it's a problem. And so all that to say, I'm not sorry that they didn't retool Shang-Chi or Eternals to make it more palatable to the Chinese Communist Party. So anyway, and this is also a really good point, Nick. Anything that came out in the past couple of years, it's really hard to compare it to all the other things.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like you think back and it seems like we've been kind of steady getting back some sense of normalcy for a while now, but like theaters haven't been fully reopened for even a full year yet, really.
Right. Yep.
So, I mean, because, and I'll say this because I researched a lot of stuff when we were preparing for the Parsec Awards last year. And like we actually went to an 18-month range where you could nominate stuff because there was so little that released in the 12-month window. We had to extend it to 18 just to have stuff.
Yeah, exactly. This is also an excellent point. And this is an interesting dynamic to the decisions that Disney has made to put their new releases on their streaming service so quickly. You don't have to wait 3 months to see it anymore. Yeah. And you don't have to buy the DVD. You can literally see it on, if you already have Disney Plus, now it's probably good for their Disney Plus subscriptions, which, they may be making more money on it in the long run. But I think that for Marvel movies, the fact that they are going on to Disney Plus so quickly is probably going to skew the box office numbers.
Yeah. Now, I don't know, does anybody know the time frame that Disney is using to move stuff from theater to Disney Plus? Because it seems like theirs is a little longer than like I know the DC stuff. Anything Warner Brothers is going to the streaming service in no more than 30 days. It seems like it's quicker than that.
Yeah. Let me see. Let me ask Google. How long? All right.
Yeah, Parsec Awards. I'm going to be dropping the nomination list later tonight, so keep an eye out for that. The list of categories, the final list. So nominations will be open tonight.
Yes.
So
the answer to that question is not immediately forthcoming on Google.
Okay. Well, it's probably different for every film, and it's probably been a moving target.
Yeah, and probably depends on how much money they made in theaters.
Yeah, I mean they can, and so we don't know. I don't even know what the new deals. They had to go back. They had to go to the theater chains and basically rewrite all of their arrangements with the theaters. So it does seem like Marvel's actually letting their stuff run in theaters a little longer before you can go watch it on the streaming service, though. Anyway, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up.
I think so.
For the night. Thank you to Megan and Nicole and Nick for joining us in the chat. And see, I'm the complete opposite, Nick. Like I love going to the theater. When we had a theater here, before I got married, I went to the theater like every new release that was something I wanted to watch. I mean, I was there on opening night all the time. And we even did that for a while until we had 3 children. And
it gets a lot more expensive. And even we had a theater in town. We did it, probably once a month. We just would go see what was in. But now we have to trek to Timbuktu and pay for dinner and tickets, and it's just next time we'll have turkey and cookies.
Yeah. So until next time, Marisha, where can people find you online? And I know you don't post much, but I also know that we're just 10 days away from leaving for Dragon Con.
It's true. Yes. And unfortunately, I'm also working. I mean, fortunately, like for our bottom line and my career, but unfortunately for my sleep and costume situation. So I am princesses_and_Padawans on Instagram and P Padawans on Twitter.
All right. And you can find me running the Twitter account for this show at sci_fictionary. You can drop us a line at thesciencefictionary@gmail.com. That's a lot of money for a movie trip, Nick. And you can find our podcast as well as the rest of the Red 5 Podcast Network at Red 5 Network on Twitter. And until next time, guys, may the force be with you.
This podcast is a member of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts and content creators, visit bio.link/Red5.